All right, Girl Scouts. In step 4 of the badge guide, they talk about training for your adventure. And in the guide, they give you a number of good tips to help you prepare your mind and body for the tree climbing experience. 2 of them they list are positive self-talk and meditation. And I find positive self-talk is one of the strongest tools I have to help me as I'm working through different challenges, both in the tree and outside of tree climbing. They also list yoga. Yoga is fantastic for building strength, improving flexibility, and balance. Every one of these is going to help us and benefit us in our tree climbing experience. But I also find that they help me in many aspects of my life, not just tree climbing. In the guidebook, they get into some specific knots and skills related to tree climbing. Now, I have to say, if you do plan on taking up recreational tree climbing as a hobby, this is something you would want to, with the knots, skills, and all that type of stuff, something you would want to work with a qualified instructor in person to learn and practice these things, not just learn them out of a book. And that's because your safety depends on the knots and skills that we use in climbing, and we just don't want to risk mistakes, right? When you climb with us, we handle a lot of the safety measures, but going on your own, it's a different story. That being said, the knots and hitches that they list in your guide, I find them very useful, and I use them quite often for many things outside of tree climbing. And I'm just going to go through 2 of them with you. One of them is the anchor hitch. Now in your book, they show the anchor hitch being used to tie the rope to a carabiner. And I will do that. I will use it like that. But anytime I want to tie a rope to an object, it's very often that I'll use an anchor hitch. And the reason I like the anchor hitch is because it's pretty simple to tie once you learn it. And it holds very well. It's a very strong hitch, okay? When I'm done with that and I'm ready to untie it, it unties pretty easy, okay? So I can untie an anchor hitch after I've loaded it. It's pretty easy. That's why I like the anchor hitch. If you've ever tied rope to something and then you have a hard time getting it untied because you haven't untied all your knots or you have to cut it off, an anchor hitch comes in really handy a lot of times. The next one they list is an overhand knot. Now it's a simple knot. If I was to say tie a knot in your rope, everybody would probably tie an overhand knot because it's a very simple knot. Basically what we're going to do is we're going to take the end of the rope, we're going to come around this length of rope and go right through that circle that we formed. Pretty simple. Ties a simple knot. It's called an overhand knot. Now I actually don't use an overhand knot much, and that's because when they get tight, they're very hard to untie, okay? But I do use a variation of the overhand knot, and it's called a slip knot. To tie that, similar to an overhand knot, instead of taking the end around and through the circle, what I'm going to do is when I come around, I'm just going to form a little loop, and that's what's going to go through the circle for me. So I don't pull the end of the rope all the way through. Does that make sense? And that ties a slip knot. It's a variation of the overhand knot. What's neat about the slip knot is if I pull on this end, I can untie the rope very easy. Now, we're going to teach you how to tie that when you come out and climb with us, the slip knot, because we use them quite a bit. We'll call them safety knots because we use them for safety while we're climbing. But you'll be tying them in your rope as you're climbing, okay? All right, so you're going to get pretty good at it. We're going to show you how to tie it when you get there. All right. The reason we call them safety knots and why we use them is if you were to start coming down on your rope and a facilitator hasn't pulled out your slip knots yet or your safety knots, you'd come down and your climbing hitch would stop. It could not come beyond the slip knot, which means nobody can reach the ground unless we pull out the safety knots. Does that make sense? So again, we're going to teach you that when you get out there, and you're going to get pretty good at the safety knot or the slip knot. All right. So as you train for your big adventure, you're going to use these tips that they have throughout the guidebook, and some of the things maybe we've covered in the video. Everything is to help you prepare both physically and mentally for your big day in the trees. Next step is step 5, and that's when we meet out at the climbing tree. So if you have any more questions, feel free to email me. I want to make sure I get you any answers or any information you need so you're ready for your big day in the trees. Right? So if there's nothing else, I really look forward to seeing you out at the tree in step 5 for your climbing adventure.